Okay, well, so yeah, let me go to John has his hand up. Let me go to John, and we're in Q&A session now, like official Q&A session, I guess. So, John, you're muted, sir.
Okay.
There we
Let's
go.
say I've made a method to get warp drive so we can get to Mars in a week rather than 10 months. Now what do? I got it working in my garage.
So, well, that's great. So I guess you're saying if you have a
This is,
working
of course,
prototype,
hypothetical, of course.
right? So
if you have a garage, that makes no sense.
But, yeah, I mean, so like, I guess if what you're saying is like, if you have a working prototype and you have, and you're absolutely certain that it works, how do you get funding from there, right?
Right.
I think what you can start with free money, which is there are grants from the National Science Foundation. There are a number of different grants from a number of different places. There are also a number of different startup incubators that focus specifically on deep tech entrepreneurs. There's one that's the Google X Prize was one. MIT has their own incubator called The Engine. There's another incubator called Hacks. And what I'll do is I'll put together a Google Doc with a bunch of these different resources so that you guys have access to them. But once you've actually got the technology and your MVP build out, I think the first step you want to go for is try to find funding that's non-dilutive, meaning find funding that does not affect the amount of stock ownership that you have. Because generally speaking, since you're the one that's inventing the idea, you want to keep as much control as possible. So I would say that, go through an incubator, and then from there, build out a team, and then set up some milestones for how you want to go from an MVP to actual production, right? Because at that point, you'd want to start thinking about manufacturing. You'd want to start thinking about parts availability, supply chain issues, hiring, growth, marketing. There are a number of different things, but the first thing you want to focus on is try to get some more free money in order to build out a team.
Free money. I like the sound of that.
Me too.
Okay, so you start with the grants and incubators. Okay, good.
Yeah. And this is not set in stone. It's all dependent on your idea and kind of what you're trying to do in the future. But I think generally speaking, you want to go for non-dilutive financing first, so that way you can minimize the amount of influence that you have in your company down the road. I think we saw Charles
Very
next.
Good,
Yeah. Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And Charles, go ahead, sir.
Hey, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, it's my first time on the APEC meetings. This is very exciting for me. I decided to join. I saw John's name on here. John probably doesn't remember me, but we worked together at NASA 20 years ago at Kennedy Space Center in the Electrostatics and Surface Physics Lab. Anyway, just hi, John. It's nice to hear you again, if you remember me. So this is a great talk, Rupert. I definitely enjoyed it.
I do remember you, Charles.
You do? Oh, that's wonderful.
I can't remember. It was a guy with a very Hispanic sounding name, I think.
That's right. That's Dr. Carlos Calle. I've taken over from him as the lead of the electrostatics lab. Yeah. Yeah. So
Mars is one big electrostatic generator. I love it.
Yeah. So is the moon for sure.
But anyway, pardon me.
No, you're fine.
Pardon me.
But no, this is great. This is the first time at this conference, and I had a couple of questions. I've blown away by this conference so far. I really enjoyed it. I've seen some of the other talks, but so for Rupert, I don't know if I have so much of a question other than just a comment. I do have, in addition to my NASA work, I do have a side company that does have propellantless propulsion technologies. And we looked at the market. We can generate thrust, we can generate high vacuum, we can do the little spinner things and all that jazz, and we can do it in Faraday cages and all that jazz, the typical scientific method. But the thing that I question is, how do we, as a community, tell the world that this is actually real? That's the biggest thing I think we have to overcome, because until we get to unity, which is basically, lift an object up by itself under the gravitational force, how do we demonstrate it other than actually going to space, showing people that it's real? And then when we go into that market, what we found, we've been doing this for 6-7 years now, and it's a slow, dramatic increase in thrust. We've come 4 orders of magnitude, but it takes a very long time. And so my question is, other than the satellites market, where is the customer base other than small satellites or satellites itself? Because the Starlinks are up there, they're going up every day. The electric thruster community is well established, hard market to get into. I'm just looking for what other ideas are there other than satellites, if there are any, and just waiting to hear your answer if you've had a chance to think about it, Rupert. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I would propellantless thrust. I would think in aerospace. I think that would be near term, without really like understanding a lot more about the idea itself. As far as finding the customer, and that's the thing, right? It's for the most part, anytime you're building something, that's like super, that's within the deep tech sector, right? Where it's something completely new. That's the challenge that a lot of the founder entrepreneurs have, right? It's finding that first customer, because it's usually what people do is what we have happen if, like, especially if you're an engineer first, is you build the idea and then you try to find the market for it. But the really cool strategy and the pivot that a lot of successful engineers do is they find the market and then they tailor the idea for that specific market, right? But if you're looking for, I would think, like, if you're trying to get some kind of additional interest in it, maybe getting some third-party validation or some measurements, right? There's Dr. Martin Timar out in the University of Dresden, and he's built out some of the most, precise propellant measuring devices like on the planet. So he's working at a university. He's a source of truth there that you could use as a reference, right? Just having some independent, I think, third-party validation of those claims, I think that'll, be very good to give you leverage in order to at least get some more seed funding and to try to build out the product and when you get some more results. And also engineering simulations as well, if you do have some. Those would help as well.
Yeah, that's fine. We have the theory, we have the experiment, we have the modeling, we have the startup funding. It's just a question of, okay, when we go look for customers, who are the customers? Who are they going to be? Who's going to pay for this? How are we going to get into the market? How are you going to, break into the market? Because, until we get to Unity, there's not a huge market out there. Most of these satellites have already chosen their propellant systems, and so it's just a question if maybe there's someone else that we're just not seeing. What is the use for this propellant technology? Yeah. What's the use of it?
Well, we can definitely continue the conversation. You can shoot me an email, and we can talk a little bit more. Just so I can try to understand a little bit more about what you're doing, and then if you'd like, we can talk a little bit and chat a little bit more in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Harold.
Yeah, I think Harold was next. Harold, go for it, sir.
Yes. Well, the Bueller had the same kind of question. What I do is propellant propulsion, and I have my device, the concept demonstrator, 4 patent pending. One of them about to issue soon, and I have demonstrated the thing I've been looking into, because I can provide enough thrust to move a satellite. That's the market I'm going through. My question is that several years ago, I went to a incubator, and they were asking me, questions like, how many cells do you have? Show me your books. Let me see the cells. And I said, well, look, I just started, I have a concept demonstrator, and I want to do this, but they said, well, no, you have to have cells. Now, what kind of question are incubator asking now at this stage? Because I have a new technology, propellant propulsion. I got lucky that nobody had that idea, even though it's a well-established science. And when I wrote my patent, that's what I did. I put what is there, the principle and everything, and I did the experiment. And I have videos on YouTube. So what kind of question are incubator asking today is about somebody come out with a new product and showing the market?
Yeah. So the question is like, just let me make sure I got the question. It's what questions are incubators asking nowadays compared to, when you went to several years ago? I think it depends on the specific incubator, but like, the big blocks, right, is what's your idea? Who's your team, right? Do you have results, right? Were they objectively verified? And what is your vision? Who is your target customer? Now, most engineer entrepreneurs in the sector, they always neglect the target customer approach, which is why I think it's really cool, like, to start thinking about those letters of intent, right? If you build out that MVP, thinking through it, you have an MVP, you have an actual a product that actually works. I think the big unlock would be to say, hey, we have people that are willing to actually try to buy this product. We have people that are interested in this product, because, like, to a certain extent, incubators, they don't really know, you know what I mean? Like, you're the expert, right? You are the one that have developed the idea. And so they just need some type of validation to show that what you're saying actually makes sense, and that it's objectively verified from some kind of third party, right? Because if you're talking about completely new physics, completely new technology, you're the only one on the planet technically that would understand it, right? But how can you convince someone else to buy that? And how can you actually build a business around it so that that incubator can make a return, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're investing in you a small amount now, so that in the future, when your company is valuable, they can make money off of it, right? A certain percentage that you would agree to, obviously, but that's the whole thing. So if you keep that in mind, if you can show that your company is going to grow, show some objective validation of your idea, of a demand for that idea, I think that'll take you a long way, as opposed to just waiting for that question to be asked to you. You know what I mean? So you can take it head on. So just to recap, right? The team, your vision for the company, the fact that it works, objective validation, right? And to show that there's some level of customer interest in the idea, albeit small, but just to show some kind of traction.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, so let me go back to Phil. Phil, go for it, sir.
Hey, hello, that's me again. I think you know me. So the National Science Foundation, I tried to contact them like 3 years ago. Obviously, I'm from Canada, but now I've got an American umbrella company I can use. But how long? They never really replied to their email. And how many times a year do they have, like, are they doing funding? And what's the range they can offer?
I don't have any specific information on what their range is and how many times a year, but I'm sure on their website, I think it's yearly. I have no idea what their investment cycle is, because I'm not directly involved with them. So I would say that you'd have to really just check out on the website and see what that application timeline is, because those dates potentially change over time, and the criteria could change as well. So I think the website for the NSF would be like the best source of truth.
Okay, and what is it that I wanted to ask? I forgot sorry, I forgot my question, but thanks.
No problem.
Right.
And
okay.
I think,
yeah, so let's go to Shrish next, sir. Oh, where'd he go?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So nice presentation, Rupert. So I just had a question on what you mentioned about Boom, right? In terms of they assembled a really good advisory board. So I'm looking for some pointers or any insight into that. How does one go about assembling such an advisory board?
Yeah. It's in the same way of, like, how does one hire a top tier team, right? I think there are some parallels in that advice would be, reach out to your own individual network, right? For one, you'd want to find experts that are in that field, right? Subject matter experts within whatever specific sector that you're working in. So, if you're like in high frequency gravitational waves, right, there are really only one or two experts in the field, but tangentially, right, you'd want someone that is familiar with communications, familiar with advanced communications, you know, LiDAR, radar, and things like that. So you'd want to find people that are experts in areas that are adjacent to the area that you're working in. So that way, you know, because like it may be hard to find somebody that's an expert in that specific thing because it's new science, right? Like you're the only one. So you'd want to find people that are leaders of their field and leaders in related fields, right? And just
fields. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. I'm sure this is a normal challenge for anyone who's doing something new, especially in this area of propulsion. You know, finding people. Yeah, I agree. No one in the direct, you know, only the entrepreneur knows what they're doing specifically, but you know, you've got to get that kind of validation through this advisory board, and you know, getting those, getting that reach is the big challenge. So, anyway, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No problem. And social media is also your friend as well, right? So, you know, we're in an unprecedented time right now where the leverage that you have, it can be with your phone, right? So if you're good at storytelling, good at networking, you can widen your circle, and you can use LinkedIn, you can use, there are a number of discussion forums, there are a number of different online communities where you can try to garner that community support, and then you can use that as leverage to reach out to some experts. So like, for example, when I was working through, you know, with some of the work for high frequency gravitational waves, the only person I knew was that was familiar with it was this guy named Kip Thorne. And so he actually did the science for Interstellar, the movie. And so I reached out to him, I sent him an email, and I had, you know, I just asked him to kind of review some of the work. And you know, granted, you know, it went to a certain extent, but he was able to give us, you know, some like really unique information. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to these folks, because like in academia, it's very different than like if you're like the CEO of a company, right? Like with academia, these people's phone numbers are just right there on the paper. So you can just call them up, which is absolutely insane, right? So,
so do they respond to such cold calling kind of stuff?
Maybe, maybe not, but it's, you know, there's only one way to find out. You know, and so you can either email, you can call, but, you know, really just the approach will depend on what you're trying to do, what kind of information you're trying to get. But, you know, I think just utilize the information that you have and try to widen your network, and don't be afraid to reach out to people that you don't know.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shrish. Let me go to Jeremy next. Jeremy G.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and can you turn your camera on if that's okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a question regarding what do you call it? Whenever you're if anybody knows any technical things about frequency input, like around extremely low frequencies, around like maybe even 20 hertz or something, is it possible to detect any like wattage, even if it's just like 1 watt, if it like is produced when you're starting to slowly increase the signal?
Oh, okay. Well, let's try and focus this in a little bit on what Rupert is presenting on, right? So
okay, we're still in context. Okay.
Yeah. So let me do that. So Jeremy, let me go to Charles, and I'm going to put your hand down and give some thought to, you know, what you might want to. Okay. Okay. Let me go back to Charles.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if you can hear me again, the NASA SBIR program also can be used to get funding as well for small startup companies, right?
Yep.
Not just NSF or Department of Defense or DOT. You know, the federal government does provide funding for these things too, which you can also, you know, make use of. There's been a lot of big changes at NASA. A lot of the naysayers on this technology are gone. So this is a new age for NASA.
That's awesome.
If you will. So,
that's awesome.
You know, and if you have a topic that you think might be worthwhile, you know, I am a subtopic manager for some areas. So whether it's instrumentation or testing methods, or, you know, basically the propulsion itself, just let me know, And we could always put out a solicitation for that, and the government would have to respond and send out calls. So that's another avenue that you can have access to for funding. But just wanted to add that to your list, Rupert.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. And
Yeah.
what's awesome is that I had a list, and the SBIR program was on there as well. So I put together this Google Doc, and I will share it with Tim after the call with a number of links for non-dilutive and dilutive funding sources that you guys can peruse at your leisure. And I think there's got a couple more with I see Charles and Mike.
Yeah. Let me see. Well, so we were just with Charles. So let's go to Michael after that. Michael, go for it, sir. And can you turn your camera back on?
Yeah, hold on a second here.
His archaeologist gear. There we go.
So, Rupert, I enjoyed your little presentation there. I got a I'm trying to approach this whole thrust thing from a different avenue. Everybody's like looking at bigger stuff, like you're talking about stuff in orbit and space. And I have several patents on a thing called Gravida Magnetism. I don't know if you ever heard of the term.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and Martin Tajmar used it in some of his earlier papers. He talked about it. And
Tajmar, yeah, I've spoken to him.
And so I've communicated with him by email. Essentially, I have the patents and stuff. So what I'm trying to do is find a way to get it so that it's anybody can have it. Anybody can have their gravity diode. And so essentially if it'd be okay with you, would it be okay to do a share on this one, on this computer, Tom?
Yeah.
Tim? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Hold on, there it is, share screen. Okay, do you see that there?
It's just starting now.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So now what we have here is an image of in your computer. There's a thing called a hard disk assembly, and it has this little disk that's spinning around, and you write on it. And there's this zone near the center of the disk where there's these little nano bumps that are made with a laser. And when your computer is turned off and there's no power, the read write head is sitting over that zone. They call it parking your head. And so essentially what I discovered is those little nanobumps produce energy called gravida magnetism. And so what my invention does is it takes those little nanobumps and it maps them out, and then it breaks them up into sectors. And so this is like in the background of that little figure of the nanobumps and the disk is basically the steps that it goes through to make what's called a private key. Private key is a mutable identity. It can't be changed because it's based on what's called topological features that exist only on that disk platen. So essentially what it does is it creates a map of the surface of the disk, and then it creates sectors, and it creates a number that it then matches against a public key, like your password on your bank account, your PIN number or something like that. That's a public key. And so what it does is your data then is essentially immutable. If somebody else with a different computer got your your pin, for example, and tried to access the data, it wouldn't be able to, because the disk platen on their computer would have a different pattern that wouldn't match. And so now the reason I want to do this is to make a new cryptocurrency, okay? That it's like Bitcoin, but instead of mining like they do now, which essentially is they have these special computers that try to solve a problem. And that's what Bitcoin uses, and uses a lot of processor and memory. And they have these big farms of servers that use huge amounts of energy. Instead of using energy, this device collects energy and it stores it on your computer in the battery. Because most of the time when your computer's running, that little disk is spinning, and in the head sitting right over that texture zone, and it's not collecting the energy, it's just wasting it. And so that's what my invention is. And I have a patent pending to do just what I'm talking about. Now, I tried the approach on, hey, I got this invention, and you can do like propulsion and all kinds of nifty stuff with it. You can do like space-time metric engineering, stuff that's pretty wild and far out there. But how do you get it accepted?
Mike, I'm going to have to talk to you about this project later, because I think I can give you
let's try and Michael, let's try and focus this back in. So I think what you're saying is what is your approach for funding
like for this? That's exactly my question.
And it sounds like you've refocused your idea so that it might appeal more to conventional funders.
Yeah,
too.
so that there's a customer essentially.
Rupert, on the crypto investment strategy. Or
well, I want a customer. I want a customer base. That's
it's
like hey, satellites are great, but how many customers you got?
I think it's a really cool cool pivot to, it's almost like an analog blockchain in a way. I think that's super cool. I mean,
Mike,
right off the top of my head. Yeah, I think that it's you'd have to find people that would benefit from, from the increased efficiency, right? The higher security. I can think right off the top of my head, probably military applications, possibly, without kind of like diving into it and being well read on it. But I think, if you're pivoting into an area that it seems like it's higher security, right? More efficient. I can just think near term, it would just be like some kind of telecommunications play, right? Or some kind of military security play, potentially, right? But that's just off the top of my head, just thinking about it without like being very well read on the software and like how it's built out. But the very first thing, right, is like you'd want to make sure that you have, and it seems like you've got a patent pending. That's awesome, right? And just like try to find any sector, find one specific sector and start talking to people in that sector to see whether or not there's a need for it, right? And if you can find who, and when you can triangulate where that need is, then you can go to those individual people and say, hey, this is what I've got. I think this is better than the current solution that you're working on, which is X. Would you be willing to pay for it? Or that's when the letters of intent can come in, where you can say, okay, we're in the early stages of production right now. This is our timeline. Once we go into full production, once this is live, would you be willing to be a customer, right? And then you collect those letters of intent, and then that's how you can use that as leverage to get more funding to build out your team and to grow the company.
Okay, thank you very much, Rupert. I appreciate your answer to my question, and I won't take up more of your time, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate your thoughts on it.
Okay. Yeah, and if you have any questions, shoot me an email.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay, and Michael, thank you. So let me go to Charles now.
Yep, Charles Crawford, or okay. Yeah, hello. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on non-disclosure agreements or NDAs?
Yeah, non-disclosure agreements. Generally speaking, anytime an investor looks at an NDA, it's like a red flag, because and that's just, I didn't create that rule. That's just kind of like the general consensus in like Silicon Valley and with startup funding. Just because there's that old school thought, right? Ideas don't matter, it's execution, right? And when you're first realizing and like communicating with like investors and VCs, you've got to make the process as easy as possible, right? Because like here's like the general flow chart of how like you would reach out to a VC, right? So you find the company, the VC that you want to work with, then you find someone that knows that VC, and you reach out to them to possibly get an intro, and then from there you would then get the warm intro from that person, and then that's when you'd send an email out with just like a short, like a 1 or 2 sentence description of your product, what you're trying to do, what your goal, what your mission is. If during that point you shove in an NDA, it'll kill the relationship before it starts, right? So I'm not familiar with like any situations where like a VC has like signed an NDA. But I mean, it could have happened, but the general consensus is that NDAs are usually a red flag for venture capital investors.
Okay, so you should avoid them completely or wait until later?
I think you could. I would try to avoid the NDAs, because like here's the thing, like if someone signs an NDA, how do you know they're not going to just like that individual person is signing the NDA, right? But if they're a VC investing in like a number of different companies, how would you know that they didn't tell one of these other competitors to actually start working in technology that's associated with that, right? And so the time that it would take you to pursue the legal battle throughout that NDA, you can actually be taking that time to build your company and to innovate, right? And so I think that's the best strategy. Anytime you're dealing in hard tech, you have to be at the bleeding edge of the innovation, and you got to move super fast, because that's why to a certain extent, Tesla, they're open source, they open source their patents, right? Because they've been moving so fast and they innovate so fast that by the time a company actually catches up to them, they're working on a completely other idea, right? Well, so it's a roundabout way to answer your question. I wish I had a more firm answer, but you want to kind of focus on the innovation as opposed to trying to lock in just this one iteration of your idea, because additionally, an NDA kind of just tells an investor that your idea is not going to change, right? Because your idea is going to change over time, right? It's going to evolve as you get customer interest, as you get more information, you get more money, you get more people on your team, you're going to innovate, right? And so you want to index towards innovation and not necessarily towards secrecy.
Rupert, also, again, I'll step back from moderation for 2 seconds. So in my experience, and I've had people approach me, like with APEC, they've had me approach me with NDAs, but also with technology I've developed and stuff. And the perspective I use is kind of like a market maker, right? Like I would say that, if it's compelling and it's demonstrated and you're, making news headlines worldwide, right? Then you can do the NDA and get away with it. But for the most part, what I've seen is, if you're looking for funding and you're kind of in startup mode, most VCs, if you give them an NDA, they'll just walk because you're not a market maker, right? You can't dictate to the market what it is. You have to accept what they're willing to do. And I did some volunteer work for a blockchain company, and they tried the NDA, and it was the same thing. It was just like, okay, well, we're not going to sign it, so have a nice life,
Yeah. And the thing is, like, if you want to get an NDA signed, right, you have to have some kind of leverage. Like, have you started a company before? Did you have a successful exit? What have you built before? So like you said, Tim, if you're starting out cold, you want to make it as easy as possible to reach out and to connect with these VCs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go to Thomas again, sir.
Am I coming through?
Yeah, you are now, sir.
I don't know if this is gonna work or not.
Uh-oh.
No camera?
Well, no, the camera is mostly working.
Mostly working?
Yeah, it's upside down.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Weird. Okay. I've actually got the camera upright. I must have inverted it at some point.
I thought it was like a new
Oh, God.
invention.
Yeah,
You
that was
missed my
like,
day,
that's-
Thomas.
Demonstrate
Nope,
it.
just misuse of an old invention in software. I was just going to say on the NDA thing, if you have to get somebody to sign an NDA, you're explaining it far too in depth that you're going to basically overload the person with information, and they're going to zone out long before they ever get to the point where they, show an interest in actually jumping in on it. So you're probably not going to give them enough information that they could use that information to go and spill the beans to someone else anyway. So you'd want to save the NDA for later whenever whenever it's people who are coming in to work on it, whatnot, so they don't get the information and walk away, to go to somebody else who has, more money, and then, end up screwing your investors. Because it's going to be your investors are going to be more, they're going to be the ones that are at greater risk. So, I mean, I would concentrate on trying to trim that down to where you're, like he said, storyteller. I don't think it's so much a storyteller, but can you be concise and entertaining enough that somebody doesn't fall asleep or zone out or, stare off and look at something else, or not being so crazy that basically they're too focused on your antics than, your information. So,
I've been approached with the conference, with American Anti-Gravity, stuff like that, with people who want an NDA before they'll even tell me what it is, right? And it's like, I got something really big. You got to do an NDA first. And I'm like, who are you? Do we know each other? Right. It's so maybe there's some dating rules involved there. It's like, let's get to know each other a little bit. So, what are you working on?
Right. Yeah. I was gonna say, if you're just dating, you don't need a prenup.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's when you really got to refine that elevator pitch, right? But just have a one,
yes.
You should be able to describe your idea in one sentence, right?
Right.
If you need 3 or 4 pages, then you've got to trim it down.
Right. It's something I've struggled with on my deal. Like I said, my focus on replicator technology, but I almost always forget to even integrate that, hey, look, it's also a refining and recycling system too. So you have, say, old electronics you don't want. Say you have a busted, LCD TV. You can feed that in pieces, and it'll literally break it down and sort all the materials so you can use it to print out a bunch of cell phones or something, and an energy harvesting system so that it's portable. That's the important thing. Bring the technology that's in big factories all the way down to where it can be sitting on a desktop or on in a garage, or you can print out bigger parts with the little ones so you can line the inside of a garage so you can print a car, or print an even bigger one so you can print a whole house and do it. So, and I've got a bunch of other stuff that once I've got their attention, like rotary systems that basically can burrow through the ground, refining the material that they're going through while printing whatever system, like a cellophane system or something like that, so it won't collapse. So you could just build whole networks of tunnels and whatnot while you're collecting material for people to live, and leave printers behind in all these nodules off the side, so it's like a bunch of bronchia. It can go any direction you want to go.
It's like the movie Screamers. That movie freaked me out.
Right. The big thing is, it's focus on the ability to do before we start looking at what we want to do.
Yeah.
If you don't have the game plan of how to get to wherever it is you're trying to go, it doesn't matter how much you know about where you're trying to go, because you still can't get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to start small. Start off with a beachhead, just one small beachhead, and then you can tangentially move to different markets.
Here's the other issue though with any kind of investing. I've got some people who've already kind of helped me out with the finances and whatnot on some of this stuff, but they all understand that this is not going to make anybody any money. What it's going to do is put a piece of technology in their hands that can allow them to do things no amount of money could allow them to do. See, so, and the ability to just spread it like a virus. If somebody has one of these pieces of technology, chances are you're going to be going home infected with one that you're going to be installing in your home, and now you'll be able to do all that stuff too.
So, yeah, that's almost like crowdfunding, right? I think that's almost like crowdfunding. If you have different
yeah,
people,
yeah.
they donate
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they
the
want to use
people-
it. Yeah.
They want to see it happen. Even if
Yeah.
they're not going to use it themselves, they have ideas. They know somebody could use his ideas, even if they, can't get around to it or whatever. Like one of the guys that heavily invested is not with us anymore. He died in April 2nd, and he knew he was close. His brother had died only a few years after he and I met. But he just, even though he didn't have as much to give as other people have, he poured a lot into it. Like, I've got laser engravers and, high voltage equipment, all sorts of stuff like that, that I just haven't had the room to work on it. So
Yeah.
That's why I was concerned about whether the camera was going to work or not, because I'm breaking everything down. I'm getting ready to move. My truck just broke down. I've got, sitting at a friend's house that's going to do transmission work. I'm going to have to rebuild the transmission because we can't even find one. So,
Yeah.
lots of slowdown. So, there's something to warn everybody here too. That's, I've been in communication with. If I'm out of the loop for a week, 2 month, I'm just basically getting resettled. So,
well, Thomas, let me go to Charles next.
Yeah.
Let me go back to Charles. But thank you again, Charles.
Yep. Back to NDAs. It makes sense for customers and people investing, but you mentioned the first thing you should do is get it verified. Say like a MIT professor that wants to rebuild your invention to prove it works. Should you get the NDA with them?
I think if from a non-investor standpoint, I think there could be an NDA in place in that end, right? Because there you have another individual with the resources and the time and the relative similar knowledge base to reproduce your idea, especially if they represent an entire university with an endowment fund behind them. That could be something that you could bring up. But I'm not very well versed in that specific aspect, but I can see how you could negotiate that as part of, gaining some kind of near-term traction or working with another external organization that's science-based as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let me go to, and let me see, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I see Mark Sokol with scales, which is awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I can see the scale.
This is for later.
Okay.
Rupert, just wanted to add on to NDAs. I had an idea about an NDA. Like if somebody shows up to you with some great idea that he claims will, make whatever happen. If you can put in the terms of the NDA that first the device needs to work for this paperwork to be valid, and second of all, if there's no improvements on the technology in a certain amount of time, our agreement is null and void. Because one thing I'm afraid of with an NDA is they'll just whisper a whole bunch of stuff in my ear, and now I can't talk about it anymore. That can include the sky is blue, or things that I've already known. I mean, most of these ideas have already been talked on APEC, but including that kind of language may protect you or promulgate the technology versus you come to a balance between protecting the IP and forcing the technology to advance as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it's almost like a forcing function. Like if it actually does work, that's when I won't talk about it. But if it doesn't, then what's the point? Right?
Yeah.
Right. And also, if we're not advancing this within a year from now, if this technology didn't advance, if it just sat here and nothing happened with it, also this paperwork's null and void because now something has to happen here.
Yeah.
It sort of like starts the race.
Yeah. I think that's
so
good.
You can use an
NDA
NDA as a pushing function instead of a blockage to advance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that is interesting. So let me go to Robert next, and we will come back to Mark in a few minutes. See a dog walking behind me.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, Rupert. Sorry I didn't get all your talk, but what I heard is very interesting. Things I didn't learn when I joined Amway. I'm a trained engineer. I tried to start my own business drafting. That's generally what I've been trained for and easiest out of all the disciplines I had in school. But when it comes to finding customers, I've been helped with an organization run by the state, but when it comes to finding customers, you're on your own. They didn't even give any pointers where to go to. It's like, and I'm not very articulate. I find, I'm sure there's a lot of people, introverts, who aren't well spoken, who have great ideas, but just don't know how to start, or if they're heard, they just don't know how to attract attention. And I learned a lot in the Amway training, I had to say, but life happens. After my parents passed, I lost all interest, especially when my mother died, because she was my only customer.
Okay.
But to find, I've been to networking groups and everything, nothing. I just didn't have the tools to learn how to find customers. I thought I was doing the right things.
Yeah, I would say that, so I guess so Robert, are you trying to, I guess, like figure out like what's a good strategy in finding customers, you know, given a current idea? Or
I thought I was doing all the things I could possibly do. ENET, the Entrepreneurs Network. I went to their meetings. I've been to job employment meetings I've already been going to. I knew some people, but it's a type of environment. There was no people that would want to take. I had to find, I didn't have the environment to hook on to the right people who knew people who would have businesses, or people who could use my skills as a draftsman. Because I bought a commercial version of SolidWorks, and it cost me a pretty penny. I still use it. I'm glad. I don't regret getting it, but having my own business, I was hoping it'll pay for itself. But because it's partly me, I'm fighting my own personality, and that's another sad thing about it. I mean, I could train myself to do it over time. I took a public speaking course in college, but still.
So Robert, I think this is the time, like so when you run into this kind of issue, and this happens a lot with like a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Especially like if you're focused on building the tech, this is where you'd have to now find someone with a comparable skill set, right? So if you're an introvert, you absolutely need someone that's an extrovert. If you only want to build, you need someone that only wants to sell. If you only want to sell, you need someone that only wants to build. It's very rare to find someone that's a combination of both. So yeah, I agree 100%, you know, that happens a lot, right? Where, you know, because it's a lonely road to try to start everything on your own. Yep.
It is. And it's like I said, there's a lot of people who don't express themselves, but they really have great ideas, who could have gone to the path of being millionaires, if you want to put it that way.
But now there's resources too, where like Y Combinator has like startup school, where you can network with other potential co-founders, and you can work on test projects to determine whether or not there's a match. So, you know, it's almost like, you know, you don't want to marry the first person you meet. In the same way, you don't want to, you know, take on the first person as a co-founder that you meet via the internet. In the same, it's like literally the same thing. So, you know, there's a lot of things you can do.
I didn't know this, and the state, you know, they're just they pretend to help you, but
yeah. So let's move on to Charles Bueller. Robert, thank you again, sir. Charles.
Okay. Oops. So I put my camera back on here. Oh gosh, what's going on here? So yeah, Rupert, let me take my glass off. So I have one final question here. So my team, I want to know if you had any experience with this, but my team wants us to go talk to a billionaire about this technology, which sounds great. It sounds awesome. But I could imagine that it's got a lot of drawbacks as well. So I didn't know if you had any experience with this, or if you had any thoughts on this in particular, this idea.
Like what stage are you in? Are you pre-seed? Have you raised any money yet? Have you built a prototype? Developed customers?
We build hundreds of prototypes, but but we've been funding it internally, 200-300K ourselves. We've tried to hold off on VCs and angels as long as possible.
Yeah.
But we, that's kind of where we're at. So, the next step is to see what my engineers want to do. They just want to quit their job and they think some billionaire is going to come in and pay them to do this. And that's, I understand that we have an outstanding technology, blah, 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 blah. And that's what everyone here is doing and working on. But the question is, there's not a lot of, technology out there that anyone should ever expect to get fully funded to do research 100% of the time for something, because some of this stuff can take years or decades to develop, except for this technology, everything that everyone is working on in here. This technology, I've worked on thousands of projects over the years, but this type of technology is deserving of full-time research funding. Very difficult to get. But I didn't know if you had any experience talking to people like this, of that caliber.
In finance, during my time in finance, we worked with like a lot of family offices, like really, really rich people. They won't be writing you a check like, from their bank account. They'll have a group of people that manage their investments through what's called a family office. And some of those family offices actually feed into VC funds. But if you're, basically going to just one individual, I would say, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to fund the entire project to the end. I think what would be really valuable is, defining some milestones for the project, for the development, from prototype to actual manufacturing. And how do you plan to eliminate risk for each of those milestones, and how much money would you need at those specific milestones? If you can get super, super specific on that kind of plan, and also be specific on what your target customer would be, I think you'd be in a good spot to at least, get some, some additional seed funding. I think there is there is a little bit of danger, right? If you give, you just tell your entire idea and just from end to end, you just let the entire cat out the bag. You talk about your entire product roadmap. I think there is some challenge there. But as far as near-term funding, I think the what I've seen like successful businesses do is, you develop a roadmap and then you break down the incremental milestones that you want to hit. So like if you're going to go into this meeting, it would be, hey, this is what we've built so far with this prototype. Our vision, for our customers X, we're hitting a roadblock now where we want to, our plan from the prototype, we want to go into manufacturing, and we need this kind of machinery to help in our manufacturing to eliminate, this risk. And so that's the conversation. That's how you want to target that conversation, as opposed to, this idea is going to require hundreds of millions of dollars. We need, X amount of money, so the more like tactical, you and your team are, and like, if you're leading your team, the more tactical you are with the plan, I think, and the more you can break up that investment, I think that would increase your likelihood of success.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rupert. I appreciate it.
How about timeshares? They give off in the real world loans to timeshares. You buy them for a vacation for your family, like 1-2 weeks out of the year, and there's funding, like you take a loan. So they give it a value, numerics value of, time and value. How do you value that in your equation?
Timeshares.
Yeah, because the end in my observable
equity,
in my experience, I experienced that these things, like at the end, they're worth nothing, and like you almost have to pay to get it out of your name, and so you don't incur on it registration fees and things like that. But at the end of the time, something got built, and it exists, and there is the modernization of that space that one person at the end will still according to your scale, which you showed us on your process at the end, like one person still owns the actual material thing, and everybody else dissipates or gets so reduced to the point where they just don't want it. you know? They
Yeah,
don't
so
want the
so I so so I
responsibility.
guess so Lulu, I guess the question is, you're saying what strategies can you use to minimize the amount of dilution in the company when you get funding?
Well, I'm saying like these already exist and they're incorporated into our financial structures and profit, you know, for creating something or an idea. And this creates, you know, structures, not hypotheticals, like, you know, time where people actually can, you know, use as investment, like, you know, paid, you know, you already like prepaid that material into existence for like, you know, yay amount of weeks for your family, a year, or, you know, I had one of those. So I know, I used it. So I know exactly the structure. You take out a loan, you pay taxes, and, you know, they give you the interest and you deduct it and so forth. You know, but it comes to a point after you pay it, you know, like they do not, for example, deduce the tax ratio because now you're not, you know, the mathematics stays the same, but like the value gets less and less and less because there's no, you know, application of the revenue that they're collecting as tax and maintenance into upgrading it. Get it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they,
so
they play
there's
with
a
all.
risk there. Yeah, there's definitely a risk, right? There are a lot of companies, right, that you know, like, so there's one company that recently went bust, a company called Fast, right? And their idea was
Oh,
to,
I'm talking about like current stock market companies such as,
right,
you know, like resort hotels, like such as the Hyatt, you know, the
yeah,
Hyatt, you know, such as the Marriott, such as the, you know, they do sell you those timeshares. I've got like the booklets that could show you, but applicability of, you know, transference of points and this and that, they always manipulate it down to a core. I have paperwork to prove it, like, you know, like to play with
yeah,
this. At the end, it's just, it was wasting, you know, my energy. Well, like, you know, they say time equals money. Well, guess what? I was exhausting my, you know, time and energy on, you know, a system that's incorrect. You know?
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I let it go. Simple as that.
Okay. Well, Lulu, thank you. Let me move along. And let me see. We have Michael and Harold, and we've got about 3 minutes left until Mark comes on. So let me go to Michael really quick, and then I'll jump to Harold really quick after that.
Okay, just a couple things. NDAs only have meaning if you're willing to sue. So if you're asking for money, obviously you don't have enough money to sue.
You know, Michael, actually, if I could jump in real quick. Yeah, I would say, and this is from my corporate career, right? But in an entrepreneurial perspective, any contract is limited by enforceability. And so, I mean, that, yeah, it's NDAs, it's, you know, money splits, it's anything. It's anything you do is limited by enforceability. And one of the things that I found in certain industries is, you know, that's one of the things that companies will look at is like, okay, how enforceable is this? You know, yeah, we'll make a deal with you. Are you willing to enforce that? You know, and there are
And
a lot of
enforcing isn't cheap.
it isn't, and that was what I meant. Where a lot of those things you're talking, you know, you may $50,000 to $100,000 in lawyer fees, and you know, and then it's like, okay, are you going to make your money back on enforcement, or are you just going to let it go? So
yeah, and the other thing that it costs you, right, is your attention, right? So like if you are, you know, you're starting something completely new, you are in a race, right? You are running, you may have a very, very small head start. You know, so the time that it would take for you to, the time and the money that it would take for you to actually enforce this NDA that you put into place, it may not be beneficial to you, or it may be, but it depends on your situation. So yeah, you're spending time that you're taking away from building your product, and you're also spending money that you take to actually grow your product to enforce an NDA for a previous iteration of the product.
Yeah. Now the other issue, the other thing observation I have, you brought up about, you know, you might not be good at sales, and the company that comes to mind is Apple, and Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. where Steve Wozniak was the creator, the maker. Steve Jobs was a salesman.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the power of having like a really, really rock solid team, right? Of having those opposite skill sets, that yin and yang. It's really super hard to do that. It's hard to find a co-founder that can understand what, understand, not only conceptually understand the idea, but like be comparable in skill set that you can work with, right, over the course of the long term, right? Because it's kind of like a marriage. But yeah, but it's easier now than it was in the past, right? There are a number of like online communities, there are forums, there are, we can utilize technology now to have a wider reach for people, not only just within the same country, but around the world. And we see a lot of like startup teams, they're actually doing that now. There are a lot of companies that are completely decentralized, right? Like Coinbase is one company where the company is like decentralized all around the world, and a number of startups as well. So you can utilize technology to find that talent, but it's still challenging. But when you do find someone, the best thing for you to do is to do something called like a time box project. Meaning, it's a project that you'd work on for the first 1 to 3 months. You have a goal, and that'll do two things. It's almost like an interview, and secondly, it'll teach you a little bit more about this person. How does that person handle stress? What their motivations are. Are we a really good fit? Because just because they have competing an opposite skill set as you doesn't mean that you guys can actually work together, because your personality may not, you may butt heads.
Yeah, so it's like marriage, like you said.
Yeah.
So thank you. I wanted to make sure I said thank you. Your presentation is very helpful, and I appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of us other participants in this conference appreciate it too. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So we're about 2 minutes over. Harold, do you think you could make it super quick, and then we'll go to Mark?
Yes.
And my apologies for the time crunch.
I second that what Mike Boboy said. Great idea. But my question is this. Most venture capitalists, they refuse to sign an NDA. Many experts that have the skill to value an idea, they don't want to sign NDA. Many books, they say, if you're going to have a great idea, start up, get an NDA. Why is it when everybody's against NDA, yet it is a recommendation that investors want to see that if you disclose the idea to an expert, they want to see an NDA, yet they don't sign, the investor don't want to sign NDA. Why is that advice so common?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the book that where you're using, what you're using as a reference. Like I've read a lot of info when it comes to trying to fund really big ideas. Generally speaking, from what I've read, like the NDAs are not really a good idea when you're reaching out to a VC. But as I mentioned with Charles, like if you have a situation where you are trying to get some third-party validation for your idea, where you're trying to work with an institution, work with a college, work with another entity that is not going to be providing an investment, but is going to be providing more so a independent verification. I think that's where an NDA would be useful. When you're trying to move into actually getting an investment now, most VCs, they're just, again, we want to make it as easy as possible. And most VCs won't want to sign an NDA just because, it's just a hassle and they just don't want to be bothered with it.
Well, yeah. But many experts don't want to sign an NDA, but thank you for the advice. Great presentation.
And Harold, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Phil, let me put your hand down. We're just about out of time. So I want to put this thing back on gallery view. Mr. Rupert Wade, sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much. The business aspect of this has been so neglected. I cannot thank you enough for helping us understand that. And I mean, if that's something that you'd like to come back and talk about in the future, and of course, as you work with HFGWs, I'd love to have you talk about those as well, because that is another topic that has been sorely neglected in our conference. So
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back. Yeah. Give me a time and a place, and we can do this again. Wonderful. And if you guys have any other questions, just shoot me an email, and I'll try to get back to you. Definitely.
Perfect. Thank you again, sir. Okay, so let me do this. I am gonna, let me see, I'm gonna mute everybody out, and